We've had so many challenges as a company. I think any small business has had a number of challenges over the last couple of years. But I think, funding's always a challenge when you first start, and we've managed to raise millions of pounds into the company. We've had some technical challenges about what we're doing, and I've got an amazing engineering team that have delivered some incredible stuff. Currently, we're going through all the pains of supply chain, and building a supply chain in current environment's pretty difficult. And also trying to do that ethically is really challenging. But we're making great headway, and it's really good to see how the markets are changing and becoming more aware of the things that we're asking for, which are the key criteria about when we make hardware products. How do they work?
Yeah, in terms of key challenges that we face, the industry is very old and established. So it takes a lot of persuading that innovation needs to happen and needs to happen now to protect our futures, both in terms of sustainability and financial sense. On top of this, we're up against a lot of well-established industry players. So as a startup, convincing people that we're reliable and trustworthy, we've had to develop a strong brand image and reputation. We're lucky enough that we've partnered with some powerful brands such as Fanuc for developing our robotic arm, and backed by Microsoft and Arrow.
There are a number of challenges for anyone working in the circular economy. The first one we always find is one of perception. Because if you think about what we do, we're taking a product, giving it a second life, and no matter how much you describe the work that you do and the quality processes and the engineering that goes into those, there's always a concern in the buyer around the quality. So quality is a number one perception issue that's a barrier to anyone in the circular economy. And we sort of frame that around language. So you could say, well, would you rather a desk that was made that was new, or would you rather used? And of course everyone says new. But if you reframe that question of would you rather buy a desk that was high carbon made from virgin resources, or a desk that was in the James Bond movie Spectre, everyone says I want the James Bond movie Spectre desk, right? And that's actually the same question but different language. So what we've done is we spent a lot of time educating customers about what remanufacturing is. We use a lot of visual images to show how beautiful our furniture is. We have showroom visits and all those sorts of things to show that physically. And then on top of that, obviously giving warranties and those sorts of things is really important in what we do. And of course, customers keep coming back because once they've seen the quality once, they come back. Other problems, I mean, there's a whole myriad of problems out there for anyone thinking about the circular economy. One of those, for instance, is investment. Now, I like to joke that if I had a good tech idea on a beer mat, I could raise £2 million tomorrow from the same old guys that funded Airbnb and those sorts of ideas. However, if you've got a really industry-leading circular economy idea, it's really difficult to raise money because there's not that established investor know-how on the subject or a pattern that they follow, which they do with tech companies. So that makes it more difficult to raise money, which is a bit of a pain, but ultimately we also see that investment markets are changing to embrace the whole new sector of the circular economy bit by bit. So that's emerging.
I think we probably chose the most challenging industry to bring a new innovative product into. The construction industry has been quite rigid and static for quite a long time, and standards and regulations have not quite caught up with the advancement of technologies. So I think something that we found quite challenging was enabling our technologies to be accredited by conventional industry standards, whilst at the same time pushing the boundaries with innovation and new technologies. And because we grow our materials, so we have a grown building insulation product, you're not really able to test it in the same way that you would test a plastic insulation product, for example. So what we've had to do is work very closely with the building board of Agromon, who have been incredibly supportive in finding ways of enabling such innovations to come into the market and not have accreditation be a kind of barrier as it has been generally in the past.
One of the key challenges that we faced was finding a reliable food grade source of surplus bread. When we first set up the business, we were working with lots of small bakeries in London. It was challenging for us to know what ingredients we were getting, both from a quality perspective and from an allergen perspective. and also the logistics of sourcing from lots of different suppliers. We've overcome that now by working with one large bakery partner who has a huge amount of surplus bread, and processing that bread on site with them so that it is in a state that we can then use it for brewing.
One of the big challenges has been trying to work within the constraints of an existing system, that you have electrical items being produced by someone else. Lots of these brands employing similar tactics, around the screws that they use, for example, and making things difficult to disassemble. And we don't have any control over that. We just have to find a way to work through it.
As a small business, I'd say the key challenges has been finances. Yeah, it does dictate everything. Standing in front of the right people who understand what you're doing. Not everybody understands circular economy. Not everybody understands the need of sustainable or circular fashion. So that education part is a challenge. That financing part is the challenge. And then getting in front of the customers or even the right partners who can amplify our voices. Because as a small business who's just a startup, early stage, it takes a lot to advertise this stuff. Even if you're doing the good thing, bad thing, it's just massive check that you have to fulfill just to make the business work. Yeah. So education, finances, and exposure.
Some key challenges are when we first started, no one understood why we were doing what we were doing, especially in terms of using recycled fish nets. People hadn't yet had the David Attenborough effect, so they didn't know about marine life, the decimation of marine life, not just from overfishing, but also from the capture of over 100,000 marine animals every year that get caught up in the nets and then consequently die. They also didn't know about microplastics in the ocean, so didn't really understand why we needed to get those nets out of the ocean and put them into a new product and create a market for a new product.
I would say in the circular economy business like ourselves, some of the key problems we've faced is working with people and industries and businesses outside of the circular economy idea. So this means that they're not necessarily sustainable, they don't quite understand circular economies. So when we're trying to collaborate or cooperate, they're not necessarily as willing until they realise someone else in the industry is also already helping us. So it's kind of getting our foot in the door, whether that's sourcing CDs from CD manufacturers who are already getting paid for their waste. Once we have one on board, they realise, it's a bit of a trend, they also want to come and help out. So I'd say the way we've overcome them is through persistence, and just it's continuing to find people that will help us. You find within a circular economy, many people are happy to collaborate. So it's working with everyone that you can and also asking others that will help you find ways of overcoming your challenges.
Key challenges are construction sector is an old sector. So obviously in terms of even installation, builders, what they are used to, right? And to shift from one system to another, it doesn't happen overnight. It's not just about the recognition and know that others know that the innovation is there, the solutions are there, but it's about how that solution can be put forward in the correct way, because you can have a beautiful solution, but if it's not the installation done properly, then we fail again, and we cannot afford that. So there's a step-by-step in that, how we connect with those stakeholders to make it happen.
Key challenges and how we've overcome them are quite interesting, because I'd say there's the normal, the classic ones, which we term classic, of probably a lack of infrastructure, a lack of material availability, especially when it comes down to food, safe materials. That's a big challenge for us. Mindset, consumer mindset is another one, but actually there's some subtler ones that have actually probably been bigger challenges for us. One is what I term the linear establishment. So when we're working with big brands, we are seen as, I guess, the circular disruptors, the small company trying to do things differently, and you are up against a very established supply chain that work in a very linear fashion, as we all know. So that's quite a big blocker for us in terms of our progression. And then the other aspect is around the challenges of circular design in that it's actually a systems approach. The old school way of designing, well, I call it old school, but most people are still designing like that, but the linear approach is relatively straightforward. You're designing a product, you're making it, you're putting it out into market, and you then never really have to worry about it again. Whereas the circular approach is a whole systems where very often we're having to develop a collection system to get hold of the materials right the way through to the whole supply chain, right the way through to a collection system again for us to take back the materials. So that design element isn't really design anymore. It's a massive systems approach that is complicated. But on the flip side of that, you end up with a far, far better product because you're involving the entire supply chain within your whole thought process. And it comes back to collaboration. You know, collaboration is key. Circular and Co, the Co is collaboration, because you won't progress as a business and as a circular economy without collaboration. So that challenge of this big supply chain sort of process feeds into collaboration, which I think we benefit from.
So big key challenges have been regulations for the construction industry, especially building products. They need to go they need to fit into a certain box, let's say, and we need to get UKCA regulatory standards via the BBA, which is the Board of Aggregates. The BBA doesn't have a standard for materials made from waste, so this has been proven to be one of the biggest sort of hurdles for a lot of companies like us. And another big problem has been accessing funding, because a lot of these startups like mine are based on products that are pre-revenue and that we can't launch unless we get approved for regulation purposes. So it's a very long and drawn out process, so you need funding that will support you with that.
The key challenges we've faced have been multiple. There's been a lot of it because we work in healthcare, which tends to be typically conservative. There's been quite a lot of resistance in certain parts and certain sectors. The way we've overcome them is we've gone where we've been valued the most, worked with the people who valued us the most. We always do everything to the highest quality standard, and we also never give up. We've been really, really resilient.
I think this is a really great question, because we face the same challenges that anyone setting up any kind of a business faces. But we get the joy of working in the way that we work. So it feels great to rescue materials. It feels great to give half of our profits away. Really, really great. I can't imagine how awful it would feel to just run a standard business. If you had just a normal business that didn't do anything spectacular or special and didn't try to make the world better for anyone else, how stressful would that be? Because you had all the challenges that I have, but none of the joy and none of the upside. So actually, I would say the challenges are completely and totally outweighed by the joy of what we do.